Welcome back, 365 Sports. Top 5 things to follow following these CFB meetings. Sorry, I got to put the cheaters on. You know, there's a lot of great things going on in my life in my 40s, but this is not one of them.
It's just glasses.
Yeah, no, it's just annoying. I used to be able to look at something, words on a page, and read it, and now there's like a step I have to take. So I think I look good now. It's just annoying to have to worry about where they are all the time. Number 5, does ESPN stay out of the Pac-12? Right now they're out. Dennis Dodd reported that an ESPN executive in a meeting said the 3 teams, their conferences we're going forward with are the ACC, the SEC, and the Big 12. And that's true today. But do they stay out of it long term? I'll be interested to see, because the only thing I see them getting back in is they've got to fill something, and the Pac-12 is the best option. But I feel like that may have already happened if that was the case.
Yeah, I have no idea on this one. I mean, obviously there's conflicting reports yesterday, but you kind of read between the lines, and they're not so conflicting. But just taking it, on the surface, you could see we're like, oh, that's the exact opposite of what was said. But there's a little bit, more into the language of this is the way it was worded could be taken differently, right? But yeah, I don't know if they do or not. I guess if I had to just venture a guess, I'd think that somehow they come up with having a late night game just because it makes some sense. But to answer this question, yeah, no idea. And that would obviously be a pretty important storyline to this, because if you have ESPN, then that answers a couple of questions about your distribution and having the linear and, things like that. Without them, well, that just, amplifies some of the questions that are already out there.
Yeah. Number 4, what noise comes out of the Pac-12 after this week? Do we get another couple weeks in and people start squawking a little bit more, or do they get quieter? What happens? I'm curious to see. It seems like every time there's one of these, benchmark, this is the meetings for this, or this is the thing for this, we start to hear,
keep your eye on Tuesday.
Yeah,
Tuesday, nothing happens whatsoever.
Yeah, we start to hear that stuff. So I'm curious to see, is there a keep your eye on Tuesday, or on June 10th, that's when something's going to happen.
I don't know that anybody's confident enough to throw out any hard dates right now, clearly, because when there's been attempts to, it typically just kind of comes and goes. But no clue what the meetings create. But I know that there is lots of noise, and that's not going to cease until there's somebody there to shut off that noise. So I think that only grows. But does it grow to a level where people feel the need to speak out again? No idea. I do think it's become very clear, though, that, 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, whenever it's been at this point, and tell me if it's been shorter than that, but we were getting these quotes that were pretty adamant about all this Big 12 propaganda and all this stuff, and not a damn thing has changed since that, it's right around the corner and blah, blah, blah. And so, that's the part of it where, when people who want to, cite the fact that, there's still another year on the deal and all that. Yeah, but the expectations came from the people talking themselves. If you didn't say anything about it and the deal's just coming up next year, then, okay, the deal's just coming up next year. I wouldn't think twice about it. But it's the fact that there have been multiple times now where it's it's close. Not only is it close, it's going to be better than the Big 12, or it's a good shot that, this is going to happen or whatever. So maybe it's just best if everybody just kind of shuts up for a little while on any side and lets this thing play out. But I know that's probably the most unlikely thing to happen.
Number 3, do meetings that happen, so if you hear this school met with this conference or whatever, do they mean anything right now, or are they just meetings? Because sometimes they're just meetings. And so I put more weight to them as we get closer to this television deal happening or not happening, but also just because schools are meeting does not mean anything's going to happen. So I would not get too excited or too depressed one way or the other, depending on how you feel about it.
Yeah, I think there's just the exploratory part of certain conversations, and you just want to hear some answers and figure some things out and find out if it's going out on a date and figuring out if it's the right person for you or not. I think there's some element of that to that. You maybe find out what, we're not so compatible. That was cool though. Cool talking to you. We're going to stay where we are with who we're with, versus, you're making a lot of sense. I like your vision. I think your outlook for the future is dead on with the way that I'm thinking about the future, and then that takes you a different direction. So meetings don't necessarily mean that something's happening. But they could, and then again they couldn't. So yeah, I think it just all depends on a case-by-case basis.
Absolutely. Number 2, and this is very hypothetical, but did the Big Ten actually save the Pac-12 in saying that they're not really interested in expanding right now? And now they all qualified. Like Tony Patini.
I was going to say they didn't say that exactly.
But like the Illinois president's like, we're not focused on expansion right now. It's all this.
It's not a major focus.
Major focus. But I actually think that the Big Ten, there's 2 things to this. Maybe they're actually genuinely not interested in it right now, and they've got what they want, and that's it. Or they just don't want to be the one to completely sink the league. Right. They're going to wait on somebody else to do it and be like, well, look, if everybody's at the buffet, we'll eat too.
Yeah, I would say no, because they're the ones that started this whole ball rolling in the first place. So no, they didn't. They just created the entire situation. Sort of like if it's like asking, did the SEC actually save the Big 12 by taking Oklahoma and Texas, but not taking anybody else? No, they created the entire problem to begin with, or they exacerbated the problem and finished the problem off to where, left everybody in limbo there for a few weeks. But no, I mean, I think you're asking this because are they saving them by not going and getting anybody else? Potentially, but they're, again, the ones that started the cracks in the foundation. If you believe those are there or not, they're the ones that got that started.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it's true. But like they do hold like
if they really wanted to, just if they felt like killing mode, they wanted to go, slice a conference in half, they could go invite a couple schools and just be done with the entire thing. But I don't know, have any insight whatsoever. You read a lot of people who feel like they're fine where they are, welcoming in new leadership, and it's not a major focal point of theirs. And there's still a lot, of chatter and people that believe the same thing we were talking about like a year ago with Oregon and Washington, and that's still, very much alive and all of that. And the truth is, I have no idea. I think we all agree that if the Big Ten wanted to go grab anybody, they could very well do that and would do that. But whether they want to or not, that's the question that nobody really has the right and one sole answer to, and that we're all just kind of wondering about. Yeah.
And number 1, is this phase 1 of a shakeup or the end game? Like, just, are we looking at a minor shakeup, or are we looking at the end game? Like, what are we looking at? Or is it nothing? But I do wonder if this is, because we talked about it earlier, it seems like we've whittled down a lot of the like extraneous possibilities, and there's very few roads that the Pac-12 can take at this point.
Yeah, phase 1 of it. It's clear there's been a shakeup for sure. I think we're maybe even a couple phases into that at this point, but I don't know what the end game.
Or is this phase 1 of the end game? Maybe I didn't phrase it right. Is this phase 1 of the end game?
Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm not gonna be the one to predict the future of college sports because, man, it's just so up in the air about what that could look like. It could look very similar to what we already have right now, which is a couple of tweaks. It could look, for the more extreme thoughts of the Super League, for example, it could look drastically different than it does right now, to where there's like truly like different levels more than there already are different levels with, FCS, FBS. We're talking about like a whole new part of that, but I don't know. There's just part of me that while all of that makes sense, the whole, soccer style, doing of things, I think a lot of it depends on the NIL stuff. I think a lot of it depends on some of those topics that we're not at all sure about what direction those are going.
One of the things is that I think this is probably the 5 years from now conversation, but after what would be 7, 8, 9, 10 years of name, image, and likeness, what schools are really in the market to be able to do that, what want to commit to it, and what want to bail out, because that's what's also going to lead to the Super League kind of a thing, is that there may be schools that be like, look, we just can't. We can't. We don't have it. If you guys want to run this way, that's fine, but the economics of this don't make sense for us anymore. Right. So something has to be different. And so that's going to be a big deal too. Like the NIL part of it is going to be huge because, or, there's going to be, fair wages across the board. I don't know. There's so many different ways it could go, but yeah, that's going to be, what universities have to decide is like, do you really want to run with this? Can you run? Like if you decide that you're going to be big time in college athletics, especially football and men's basketball, in the major revenue sports, if you're going to be big time, do you want to decide that you have to do it like Georgia does it? because the only way that you can compete with them is to spend the money that they get or to find the money that they have. And that's just not how money works. You can't just decide you have something. You either have it or you don't, or you want to allocate it or you don't. So that's going to be interesting. Stanford's one to me that's going to be really interesting in the future, in that they were so dominant in so many athletics for so long, but now when you're talking about paying athletes, and they're not going to change their standards to get more athletes in, they're still going to have the same ones. How many elite guys do they lose that are deciding not to go to Stanford because they can make $150,000 a year going to a different school? Like that's going to be interesting, especially on the Pac-12 side of it as we move forward.
Yeah, I think it's less about the guys who choose that. I think it's about what the schools can choose to do, because I think a lot of the guys who go to Stanford are thinking about the long-term picture to begin with. They're not thinking about the quick 150 they can make going to, wherever. They're thinking about the millions they can make with that Stanford degree. So I think those cats are bred a little bit differently than maybe, others making decisions to go places for whatever variety of reasons. But to your point, does the school want to invest? And they've got more money than, God. But, do they want to put a large amount of that large amount into paying players? Like, I don't know. Then that could lead to questions about just the whatever lifeboat you find right now. Is that still inflatable 10 years from now? And what does that look like? That's, again, the mystery that we're all kind of trying to unravel.
Well, the other problem is that because they have standards, even if they're going to pay, their field is still smaller. So you're going to have to, because there's guys who could go to Stanford that have decided already to go to Notre Dame, and they don't care about Stanford. They're going to want to play football in Notre Dame, so that you're just not going to get that guy. So there's a guy who's not going to go there because he's never wanted to go there. And it's not like if you're Notre Dame, you can just go back into this big pool, or Georgia, you can go back in this big pool. Stanford's pool is, and Notre Dame is probably the worst example, but Georgia, you got this different pool that you're wading in as far as talent goes as well. All right, that's going to do it for us. Thanks to Ross Dellen.